Now, the latest reports from 2010, which are the latest numbers that we have, and they look to be creeping up a bit from there, according to the estimates, are 15.1% of all Americans are at or below that poverty level. And as I said, they think that when they release the 2011 numbers, which will happen shortly before the election, it could show that there's even a little bit more of an uptick in that number. So I'm very pleased to be joined in studio today by Pennsylvania Republican Pat Toomey, who is on the Senate Budget Committee. He's also a former super committee member and a surrogate for Governor Mitt Romney. Good to have you here today, sir.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I mean, when you look at these numbers, 1 in 6 in America on food stamps, falling below the poverty levels. And one of the first things that came to my mind when I saw that number and I saw the comparison back to the 60s is the Great Society of President Johnson, and whether or not the creation of all these programs that were supposed to prevent this from happening in the coming decades, whether or not that's a failed experiment.
Clearly, it hasn't worked. These programs just keep growing. You mentioned food stamps.
Yeah.
Spending on food stamps has quadrupled in the last 10 years. I mean, it's a stunning increase, huge expansion of these programs. The problem here, Martha, is we don't have a strong economy. We're not creating the jobs. There is no substitute. There's no better anti-poverty program than jobs. And as long as we have this feeble economy, which I think is caused by really flawed policy coming out of Washington, as long as this is the case, then sadly these numbers are not going to improve.
You know, one of the things that strikes me with a number of people that I've talked to recently about this is that we're seeing it creeping into areas where we didn't see it before. People who used to help, you know, volunteer are now looking for that kind of help themselves. Yeah. It's in the suburbs. It's in places where we didn't see it before. Even here in the cities, you know, more people out begging for money, I've noticed in recent weeks and months. The crime rate seems to be up in some of our inner cities. You get all of these other impacts.
Well, and this is what happens when people don't have work. And, you know, even though the unemployment rate seems to have leveled off somewhere at a totally unacceptable level, but, you know, somewhere around 8.2% understates how bad this is by a lot, because the reason it's dropped is people are giving up. They're not looking for work. The percentage of Americans who are actively participating in the workforce now is at a 27-year low. This is why we've got to change the current policies are not working, and we've got to change our course.
I'm curious what you think about this. There's a lead story in the Financial Times this morning that quotes John Williams, who's the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, basically saying that he thinks that further action needs to be taken to increase the progress and to boost the jobs market. And he's talking about basically printing more money, more stimulus, right, from the Fed.
We've been doing this for 4 years now. The Federal Reserve printed about 2/3 of all the money the government borrowed last year. We are monetizing our debt. This is extremely irresponsible, in my view, and very dangerous. The fundamental problems afflicting our economy are not monetary in nature. It's massive overregulation. It's spending that's completely out of control and driving huge deficits. It's a threat of massive tax increase. It's an administration that seems almost hostile to the private sector and certainly denigrates entrepreneurship. This is an environment where we shouldn't be surprised we're not creating jobs. We've got to change this so that we can create the kind of jobs, have the economic growth that will lift people out of poverty, as we've done in the past.
I mean, it sounds, you know, that there are solutions that you see that many people would say are so much easier said than done. When you look at the numbers of people in this country who are, you know, falling under that level and who need help and are relying on some of the systems that have been built in that I talked about in the Great Society, you know, what do you do to get past the point where you can, you know, sort of help them and then change the underlying system?
Well, as I mentioned before, I mean, if we push back some of these regulatory excesses like the Obamacare bill, like Dodd-Frank, like an EPA that's been out of control, those things alone would encourage economic growth and job creation. If we then reform the entitlement program so that they serve the people who really need it, but we put them on a sustainable path, I think there'd be tremendous confidence in the economy again, and we'd see an increase in investment. At the end of the day, the solution to poverty is more jobs and more opportunities and bringing people back to work. Yeah. That's what we should be doing.
Boy, it's a tough situation. Thank you very much, Senator Toomey. Good to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
See you soon.
Well, there's